You're watching NewsX. I'm Ritangshu Bhattacharya. An exclusive news break at 5:30 p.m. Arushi murder case has not been solved yet, but filmmaker Manish Gupta is now out with a film based on this murder case. Now, although the filmmakers deny it, the Bombay High Court has cleared director Manish Gupta's upcoming thriller Rahasya and has refused to put a stay of the film's release as per as asked by the parents of Arushi, Nupur and Rajesh Talwar. Reports stated that the court has ruled out that the film's story does not depict the facts of Arushi's murder case and there is no case made out for a stay or any ad interim relief on the film. Now, apparently the Talwars have given a go-ahead to filmmaker Meghna Gulzar to make a film on the murder case. Rahasya is all set to release on the 30th of January.
The very fact that it was shown to the family proves the fact that everything is fiction. If it had got something to do with the murder case, then obviously one would shy away from showing it to the family. The fact is that if you have some kind of a suspicion about something, it's better to get it cleared instead of having any kind of roadblocks later on. So if you are completely clean in your process and the way you've made the movie, then you might as well show it. No big deal. So a good act is being portrayed as something suspicious. That's very very strange for me. So and secondly, if there was only one murder in the entire world, I can understand one start comparing. There are thousands of murders which have happened, so it can be anything. The point is that the entire work of fiction, anybody writes fiction, somewhere you'll find some connection, and that doesn't mean it's taken from there. So this is purely 100% fictional. If it has some similarities, if you have a doubt, here, please see the film, is what I think Manish has done. Showed it to the family, said, listen, there's nothing here. Can you see anything? No? Okay, fine. Perfectly fine. That's how it's been done.
Let's now go across to Manish Gupta, the director of the film Rahasya, as well as Tiska Chopra, who's acting in the film as well. They're, of course, joined by my colleagues Abhishek Datta, live from Mumbai. Also joining me from the news center is my colleague Snigdha. Abhishek, if you could ask the first question to Manish and Tiska as to how they claim this film is not a depiction of the Arushi murder case.
Right. So I have Manish Gupta along with me and the lead actress Tiska Chopra. And the first question that comes to you, Manish, is that how could you claim that this film is not exactly what Arushi murder case was? How does it differentiate from it?
There is no similarity between the Arushi murder case and my film Rahasya. This is what I have maintained since day one, since I started making the movie till today. And finally, I have received a go-ahead from the court, from the Honorable High Court in Bombay, that we are free to release this movie. And the court, after viewing the movie, after reviewing the case, is also of the opinion that there is no similarity between the Arushi murder case and the film Rahasya.
Right. Tiska, even you're along with us right now. So I would like to ask you that while you were shooting for the film, obviously thoughts must have come into your mind that, okay, people would talk that this is similar to the Arushi murder case. How do you state that, it's different from what the Arushi murder case was?
I think you're putting words in my mouth. When I was shooting the film, there was no such feeling in my head. I look at it purely from an academic perspective. I'm an actor who plays a woman who's lost her 18-year-old daughter, who's been murdered, and there are 6 people who are suspects, and it's an extremely gripping Sherlock Holmesian, Agatha Christian type of film. So for me, there is no question of thinking that it's based on anything similar.
Right. So you heard that right from the actor and the director that this film is not similar to what Arushi murder case is.
Abhishek, I'd like to point out a number of facts which are there in the synopsis, and I hope you put that across to Tiska as well as Manish. Number one, an 18-year-old girl who was found dead, murdered in her own house. Yeah, she was 16 years old. Number two, the father of the main character in this film is deemed the prime suspect of the murder. Again, an obvious similarity. Number three, the fact that, of course, after many months, there's still no clue as to who exactly has done it. There are a number of obvious similarities which come across to the Arushi murder. So, how can the filmmakers or the actors say that there might not be any resemblance at all? Because a cursory reading of the synopsis of the film immediately brings to any person's mind the similarities with the Arushi case.
Right. Manish, so the question is that there are a couple of things that came very similar to what the Arushi murder case was. Number one, that it's the murder of an 18-year-old girl. Number two, the father is considered to be the suspect. And number three, there are a lot of people who are being speculated for the same. There's a mystery revolving around it. Besides, there are another number of similarities from what the case was. The question is also applicable for you, Tiska. So, how would you still justify the thing that, that no, my film is completely different?
Yeah. See, if you take any given film, it can be compared to some or the other case somewhere in the world. Any given film can be called, okay, it was based on this case, based on that case. So that's no basis for saying that my movie is about the Arushi murder case. Also, let me say that Arushi was a minor girl. She was 14 years old. She was a child. Whereas in my film, the girl, Aisha Mahajan, she's 18 years old. She has a boyfriend. She's been pregnant and she's a woman. She's an adult. So there is no similarity in that criterion either. Apart from that, there are 6 suspects who have, they have motive to probably have murdered her. So the father is not the only suspect. There are 6 suspects. And now the detective has equal suspicion on all 6 of them. So it's incorrect to say that the father is the only suspect. So that's how I'm saying that it's not based on the Arushi murder case, which I have maintained from day one. And like I said, the Honorable High Court of Bombay agrees with me.
Tiska, what are your thoughts about the same thing, since we've pointed out a couple of similarities that we have observed from what the trailer is and from what the story revolves around in? What is your take on it?
If there is a murder, there will be somebody who will have been murdered, somebody who would have committed that murder, and a cop investigating or the CBI investigating. These are givens. And that you draw a parallel to anything that is real life is, I think, the imagination of the audience or anybody else. I don't think the makers had any intention, neither Manish nor us as actors played it out that way.
Right. So it seems to be a completely different film from the Arushi murder case that had happened a couple of years back, and the story is completely different.
Indeed. Okay, so that's a statement of the makers and the actors in the film. Snigdh, can this delineation be effectively made here? Now, just by saying that the film is not inspired and the statutory warning any similarities with any fiction, any character living or dead is purely coincidental. Can this really be applied to a scenario as this here? Can filmmakers get away by pretending that obvious similarities do not exist?
Tangshu, that's exactly what director Manish Gupta has been doing. In fact, even when the censor board report on the film came out, the Talwar family member who was allowed the screening of the film claimed that the report talked about the dissimilarities between the film and the actual reality of what happened. But they didn't point out the glaring similarities between the actual case and the film. In fact, they said that there are about 100 similarities. And even now what Mr. Manish Gupta is saying, talking about the film, he's just talking about the dissimilarities, not the glare. It cannot be denied that the various things that have been pointed out in the trailer that we saw just right now on our screens, there are lots of similarities of what happened, what happened in the case and what is being shown in the trailer. So he's just talking about what's not there in the movie.
Fair enough. Fair enough. Let me also be the devil's advocate at this point here. Abhishek, there's also been another important aspect which has been pointed out, that while the Talwars have not objected to another movie which has ostensibly been made depicting the Arushi case, which has been directed by Meghnad Gulzar, they came about giving their objections to this case here. Now, if you could ask Manish and Tiska that question here as to why do they feel there's a case of double standards being applied by the Talwars, only objecting to those films which they feel do not portray them, or at least their fictional equivalents as is being interpreted in a positive light?
Right. So Manish and Tiska, the Talwars have, of course, gone ahead to you guys and claimed that you guys were making a film, and they were worried at some point of time that your film could probably put the Talwars on a bad light. But at the same hand, we have Meghnad Gulzar, filmmaker Meghnad Gulzar, whom the Talwars have approved to make a film on the Arushi murder case. So do you feel that they are playing double standards, because a film that is not going to portray them showing the positive side of the Talwars, but they must have got that fright somewhere that your film might just portray them on a negative side? Do you feel that the Talwars are playing double standards at some point?
I wouldn't want to comment on that, because I would like to keep my stand clear, and I wouldn't like to comment on anybody else's stand. So I would not comment on that. Right. But I would like to add, it's for everybody out there to understand. The papers are out there. You know what is happening. with both films. So it's for everybody to make their own judgment about this.
Tiska, what do you feel? Why was your film Rahasya being pointed out by the Talwars, and why is Meghna Gulzar being given, a heads up by the Talwars so that they can make a film on them?
Frankly, I'm not sure. I've just got to know during the publicity campaign of our film that there was such a film. I wasn't even aware that there's such a film being made. Sorry, I live in a bit of a matchbox myself. So I wish them great luck, and the fact that our film has got the go-ahead from the judiciary speaks more words than anything else. If there was that the court felt that there was anything similar, or there was anything that was objectionable, I'm sure the Indian judiciary is strong enough to uphold any judgment that they think is valid. I don't think there is any substance to what the Talwars are doing here, so I guess that's what the court has also ruled.
Right. So basically the makers and the actors from the film are really happy that Rahasya has got a legal go-ahead so that there are going to be no obligations while the film is being released.
On a larger note, Abhishek, if you could ask Tiska and Manoj and Manish, should there be a problem with the depiction of a real life event? There have been films in the past also which have depicted real life events. So some of them have been authorized by the real person or the relatives of the real people. Some of them have not been. Should the consent of the real people in this case be necessarily required in order for a filmmaker to go ahead with his right to artistic expression and depict his version of a real life event?
Manish, do you feel that a consent of a family member on whom the film is being made upon, do you think that there is, an approval from them or probably a heads up from them is required when you actually go ahead and you decide to make a film on that particular story or the particular issue?
Absolutely. If a filmmaker is making a story on a real incident or on a real person, it is imperative that he takes the permission of either that person or the family member, in case the person is deceased. Okay, so it's imperative for a filmmaker to take permission from the family members or from the person. But it doesn't apply to our film at all, since we have made a fictitious story, like I've said before.
So you heard that from Manish itself, that the film is a fictitious story and it's got nothing to do with the Arushi murder case. It's a different plot, it's a different story altogether.
Alright, Abhishek, I'd request please Manish and Tiska to stay on with us. Snigdha, discussing that same issue here, is the right to artistic freedom and an artist's license to tell a story, should that necessarily be impeded by the permission of people who are relatives of that person? We have seen that happening in the case of biographies or something. There might always be a vested interest not to let the truth out, but should that really stand in the way of letting the truth out?
और आयशा महाजन की बॉडी पर जो स्क्रैचेस मिले वो डॉक्टर सचिन महाजन से नाखून हुए.
I'm sorry, Tangsha, could you please repeat that?
My question, Snigdha, is that should the permission of the relatives of a particular subject of a film really be necessary in order for an artist to come out and give his version here? There can be many people who might object to unsavory or at least negative portrayals of their character coming across, but should there really be a barrier to the truth being told?
Well, Tangshu, it depends on what side of the truth are you on really, because of course I think permission is required, because when you're making a movie, especially in our country where so many people flock to the theatres, it does leave an impression indeed, of course. And in this case, Mr. Gupta is insisting that the film is not about Arushi Talwar, but we cannot deny the various similarity that we're seeing. However, in any case, if you're making a film based on any person...
Snigdha, I request you to stay with me. Let's get in a legal perspective. Your noted lawyer Sanjay Hegde joins me on the phone line. Mr. Hegde, where do we draw the line? The court has come out very clearly saying that the film cannot be seen as an official representation of the Arushi murder case and has given the film the go-ahead. So there's no legal barrier which stops the film. But word of mouth travels fast, and obviously the curiosity factor will hinge over the Arushi murder case here. So is there any way we can draw the line and when the filmmakers can say that it is not based on the Arushi murder case, where there are clear similarities, coincidental or otherwise, which have come out?
See, there have been cases which have ruled either way.
Yes.
When a case directly claims to be based on a certain set of events, then the people involved in the events would have a right to object. If the filmmaker had said, this is the Arushi murder case, my version of it, then the Talwars would probably have a right to object, because their appeal is still pending in the High Court, and then it may have to be further taken to the Supreme Court. So to avoid prejudicing that, they may have a claim. And in fact, this has happened a long, long time ago, way back in the 1930s, in a case called Yusupov versus Metro-Goldwyn-Mayer, where it dealt with the murder of Rasputin. One of the things suggested in that film was that Rasputin was murdered by Prince Yusupov because Rasputin slept with Yusupov's wife. So the courts then did grant an injunction in favor of Yusupov. That's an old case. In India also, the law normally is that if you are directly making a biopic, then the person concerned or his family have a right in that person's reputation not being affected. But
indeed,
as in this current case where Mr. Gupta says, no, I have nothing to do with the Arushi case,
okay,
then it becomes a question of fact.
All right, Sanjay, Mr. Hegde, stay on with me. Ashok Pandit, noted filmmaker and a member of the censor board, joins me on the phone. And Mr. Pandit, your response to this, the censor had come out and pointed out obvious similarities with the Arushi case, but the court has given it a free run here. Should the consent of the relatives of a particular subject of a film be deemed essential for an artist to come out and give his version of a story?
You see, if you're making a biography and if you have announced that this is based on this particular incident, then it's a morality. It is a question of morality that you should take permission of that particular family or the concerned people before making a film. If you're openly saying this, that this is film based on that murder case, and if you don't say that, then as a thriller you can make a film whatever you want to make. But the point is, if you're announcing it, you publicize the entire film saying that this film is based on the murder case of Arushi, and then you don't take the permission from them, you don't sit with them, you don't discuss the script with them, and you use that tragedy of that family for making a commercial film is ethically wrong.
All right, fair enough. So the jury is out as well as to whether such films are ethically right or not. But thank you so much, Mr. Ashok Pandit, Sanjay Hegde, as well as Manish Gupta and Tiska Chopra for giving us your views. Also, thank you to Snigdh Bontial and, of course, to Abhishek Datta. We move on to some breaking news which is just coming.